Halo is beginning to waft a familiar odor, one that smells faintly of blue hedgehogs. I can't be the only one that sees the same story playing out. Lauded first-party franchise that gave people a compelling reason to own the console it was exclusively released on, then 3 to 4 good games, and then a slow and painful decline as it ran out of steam. I wish I could say that I feel sorry for 343 Industries. They were left with the desiccated husk of a series that had no long-term planning for more than 3 games. But all of their largest problems didn't stem from the original Bungie-developed games, but are of their own making. Everything they've added since taking over has had to be walked back in the following game, or wrapped up off-screen in one of those Halo novels. So I went into Infinite expecting some of the characters and plots introduced in Halo 5 Guardians to have met the same fate, namely Agent Locke and the rest of Master Chief's beta orbiters. But to my surprise, it's more of a case of finding anything that remains at all. Since the end of Halo 5, several months have passed and everyone is dead. And I mean everyone. All the Spartans besides Master Chief seem to be gone, the Infinity destroyed, the Prometheans aren't even mentioned, the Guardians never appear, and even Cortana has been killed off-screen. They may as well have rebooted the whole damn thing back to Combat Evolved if they were going to wipe the board clean so much that the new game resembles it right down to Master Chief and his Blue Windows assistant being stranded on another Halo ring where an ancient enemy was locked away by the Forerunners. There's a whole game worth of events you're just told about, and in some cases not told about. What happened with Cortana? She realized the errors of her ways and turned good again, and then died. What about her army of Prometheans, Guardians, and human AIs that sided with her? At this point, the strawman character I'm asking these pointed questions to stopped talking and promptly set himself on fire because we could both see where this line of questioning was headed. Supposedly, the Infinite in the game's title stands for the next 10 years of Halo's story being told within it through content updates, but so far the only Infinite I can see is the amount of dangling plot threads. When you prove again and again that you can't commit to anything you previously started, why should anyone invest time in your project when they know most likely it'll never be resolved, or worse, finished in a book? I submit the opening of Halo Infinite compared to the opening of Doom Eternal to anyone who wants to chime in with their Master Chief versus Doom guy theories.
My name is Atriox.
Atriox has a spell on his name because most people haven't played the Halo RTS games, where he's apparently a very big deal. To me, he's just another brute, and I honestly forgot about him until I rewatched my recorded footage, because he only shows up again for the after-credits scene, and Master Chief fights an entirely different brute who acts virtually the same as him for the duration of the game.
And I am the last face you will ever see.
Even the kids in the multiplayer know to check for signs of life by dipping their balls on their downed enemy's face. Atriox didn't even deal a fatal blow to Master Chief before dropping him out of the ship into space. And since Master Chief's death would be a major defeat for humanity, why dispose of his body when you could keep it as a trophy? That being said, I'm not exactly sure how Chief survives floating in space for 6 months in just his suit. Normally, you would have to be in a cryo chamber to survive that, but I suppose someone who's vested in the lore will kindly explain why his physiology allows him to forego breathing, eating, and drinking for that amount of time. The pilot's name is Fernando, and I'm sure we will all grow to love him as much as we're expected to by the end of the game. After all, he comes with the collector's edition abrasive yet sympathetic character box set, annoying, cowardly, and demanding, yet by the middle of the game will slowly open up and reveal that he's actually just afraid, and that he has a family he wants to go back to. Meanwhile, Chief just stands there while his visor wipes everyone else's character development from his face automatically. Fernando only manages to get in the way of a plot that wants to repair its past mistakes, re-establish Chief and Cortana's partnership, deploy 2 new enemy factions, and then here's this guy, constantly demanding they drop everything and go home. The writing equivalent of a character asking if we're there yet. Powering up the Chief from the Pelican's power somehow also powers up the Pelican at the same time, even though Fernando says he rerouted what little power he had left into Chief's suit. Since there's a giant section blown out of Zeta Halo, the entire thing should fall apart since its structural integrity is compromised. There's also the issue that since gravity on a Halo ring is created through centrifugal force created by the spin, those chunks where the game takes place would no longer be part of that spin, and would be flung away from the ring by their stored inertia, and would also have no simulated gravity. FPS gameplay-wise, Halo is still what you expect ever since 343 Industries took over. You still have sprint and aim-down sights for every gun, which feels out of place, though they did bring back the selectable equipment from Halo 3 and Reach, though the only one you'll ever use more than once is the grappling hook, which has actual use in attacking and getting around the world. Gone are the jetpack's armor lock and the precious dodge roll of Reach. In their place, you receive dashing, dropping a weak shield wall, a force push, and scanning for enemies. Not a bad idea, but hampered by the developers not putting enough creativity into it, or too worried they would unbalance the gameplay. To which I would ask, did anyone in your testing team ever load up a Razorback with 6 Marines sporting sentinel beams? Who needs the Master Chief and his fancy equipment when what you actually want is a good chauffeur who can ferry Marine squads from location to location as they vaporize enemies I haven't even spotted yet? Speaking of the vehicles, I expect a level of floatiness from Halo, but all the vehicles control like someone filled the tires with helium. Like a good prostitute, my Warthog did most of its work on its back, since they're prone to tip over at the slightest bit of uneven terrain. But all the vehicles either come with handling issues, or were given a weapon that does less damage than kicking sand on someone's new shoes. I'd land hits with the Banshee's fuel rod cannon dead on, only for them to survive so often that I decided the most efficient option was to ram them like a mother bird protecting her nest. I've watched people in multiplayer walk right past fresh Banshees, now that they're useful only for giving your enemy something large and non-threatening to target. But the worst has to be the Brute Chopper, which is nearly impossible to steer and can't even charge into vehicles anymore to destroy them. The only vehicle worth having is the Wasp. If you get your hands on one of those, treat it like the Pope and surround it in glass. I will say that overall, my experience with Halo Infinite was more positive than either Halo 4 or 5, making it only slightly more enjoyable than harvesting rubber for Belgians. I even sunk quite a bit of time into the multiplayer first before the campaign released, which led me to the surprise that most of the weapons that are shit in multiplayer in their current state are quite useful in single player. It's not just damage values, but the amount of recoil and function. Take the Ravager. In the campaign, it's a weapon the AI can use as long-range artillery, something that would be near impossible for the player to do, and the damage output is equivalent to powering it with your own tiers and does about as much damage as you would expect. It seems they balance weapons differently for single player, presumably because grunts don't send angry emails to the home office when they get killed too much by sentinel beams. But the balance they went with for multiplayer seems to be that you have a pistol at the start of the match and that should be good enough, since nearly everything else is a step down from it. I'm quite sure that door had a button to open it, and it would have been faster than tearing it off. Master Chief was kind enough to not shoot the Brute in the head while he went about it though.
It's locked down. Requires a hack.
Okay. And you can do that?
No.
I guess Chief learned something other than the grappling hook from Doom Guy after all.
The Spartan. No. Something better. The Master Chief returns.
Escharum is the game's main antagonist in the same way that phone call about your car's extended warranty is the biggest annoyance you face in your day-to-day life. He takes every opportunity he can to call up Chief and boast about how he's going to kick Master Chief's ass at SummerSlam or whatever. It's one thing to have a villain who likes to hear himself talk, but if he never follows up on any of his threats, then he just comes across as posting the Navy SEAL threat meme.
We are running out of time.
The batteries?
Charging slowly. I don't know. It's gonna be close.
How are the Pelican's batteries charging? It was pulled into the banished ship by the stasis beam. Did they plug it in for you?
Blade Master. Follow the Spartan from a distance. I want to know everything about him.
But never inform me of his location or where he's headed so I can prepare defenses or a trap. Just watch him and tell me if he shoots things.
If we stay out here any longer, they're gonna come back. They'll find us and they'll kill us. What is it you're searching for?
Match found. Signal located. Waypoint uploaded.
There's nothing there. You're looking in the wrong direction. We need to go home.
This Pelican doesn't have a slip space drive. Where else are you going to go?
If you knew how you were going to die, how you were going to die, if you knew how you were going to die.
Cortana may be dead, but her digital ghost spends the game running your ASMR protocol in Master Chief's ear.
It's been 6 months. Where have you been?
What happened? Where is Cortana?
The rogue AI known as Cortana is gone. She's been deleted.
With Cortana out of the picture, Chief gets a new AI partner, younger Cortana, a copy of her to be exact, who doesn't know that she's a copy. And it doesn't take a super intelligent AI to figure that one out. But the weapon, as she's known, remains oblivious to that fact until near the end of the game. 343 Industries forced himself to walk on eggshells when it comes to Cortana's character design. Cortana was always depicted as a nude woman, but there was no definition or detail to sexualize her old designs. Then with Halo 4, the developers sexed up her model to the degree that you could measure the amount of boob sag she had going on, and have been very embarrassed by that choice ever since. You actually get to see Cortana's original depiction in memories a couple times in this game and it looks just fine. Shame they had to go and ruin it. Instead of taking off all of her clothes, they stripped her in a different way, by removing her personality.
I was created for one purpose, and that purpose is no longer needed. My mission is over.
We have a new one. The Banished are planning to fire this ring. We need to make sure they don't.
You don't actually know that's the case, and it would be suicide to do so since all the other rings would fire and wipe out life throughout the galaxy again. Master Chief will never actually learn what he's trying to stop on the ring. He just knows that he needs to stop it. Press E to insert waifu.
They smell even worse than I imagined.
You can smell them.
Well, an array of sensors in your armor can, and I analyze the input. You smell fine, by the way.
He's been floating in space inside that suit for 6 months. There is no way he smells good. You'll need industrial solvent to peel that suit from him. I grew to hate power seeds in the multiplayer since Stockpile is by far the worst gameplay type, forcing you to chuck half a dozen of them across a map 3 times in order to win, all the while hoping your team will also decide to forego their own personal enjoyment and help you just to end the match quicker. If done correctly, you win in 5 minutes, or lose in 5 minutes. Both are acceptable outcomes. So when I kept encountering them in the single player, my irritation was peaked again. Only now you have 1 or 2 2 that you have to find and bring to a terminal. Why would an advanced alien race even build a terminal that needs a giant battery to open a door instead of just connecting it to the ring's already seemingly infinite power supply? Speaking of terminals, like previous Halo games, most of your objectives are to get Cortana 2.0 to 1 so she can turn something on or off. In fact, I think this game set a new record for the amount of times I had to insert Cortana into a slot. Someone needs to stick a 5G antenna onto Chief so she can do this crap wirelessly already. You'll come across cores from fallen Spartans that allow you to upgrade your equipment. This upgrade tree was made possible by all the new Spartans this series created after Halo 3. The Spartan Force legacy is nothing but token upgrades. This is also what you're expected to sink a lot of your open world playtime into finding. But once you upgrade your shield and grappling hook, there's no need to invest in any other equipment since you'll never need them beyond their starting point, and the upgrades they receive barely even change them. Even the Banished realize their weapons suck, so for most of the game you will come across brutes and elites using human weapons.
I, of course, know of you, Spartan. Your legend, the fear you inspire is admirable. The hope you stir in the hearts of your kind. Misplaced.
How so? He did save them from the Covenant flood and the Didact. Does reputation mean nothing?
The Banished are using a modification of the Covenant's BattleNet protocol. Pretty easy to push through, and done. I've removed this location from their system. We're safe here.
You can simply delete one of the Banished bases from their network and they completely forget about its existence. You'll be capturing quite a few bases by pressing a button actually. The first 2 levels play exactly like your standard Halo game. After that, the open world part of the game begins. I can't honestly say that open world improves Halo any. It seems they played that second level of Combat Evolved and decided to make that into an entire game, because that's all you really use it for. By having you drive around and rescue stranded groups of Marines, and taking over forward operating bases so you can fast travel between them. The only other activities are killing special Banished targets or collecting more armor cores for upgrades you don't need. Apparently giving the pilot more character means he can't do his damn job by flying you to your target anymore like in previous games, so Chief has to drive himself. When you want to torture someone but you can't get too graphic with it else you raise the game's ESRB rating, just hook them up to an ambiguous pain bed.
Good. The others, the Spartans. Did you?
I'll find them.
I'm happy to see that 343 Industries accepted that I was right and more Spartans only diluted Master Chief's role, because they've killed most of them, and you never fight alongside a single other Spartan for the entire game. This is of course another problem they created for themselves, being reset to exactly what it was before they messed it up, but progress is progress. I always assumed that when an AI is hacking something, they were rewriting code or generally doing something that was beyond my human comprehension. Turns out the weapon is simply doing the same bullshit hacking minigames we have to do. There's a new enemy type in Infinite, skimmers, but they basically replaced the drones from Reach, so calling them new is a stretch.
This installation's weapons may be yours, but its secrets are not. It's protected, the containment facility in particular.
Containment? The Flood? Why would I... You and I both know that there are worse things than the Flood within this ring.
This is a case of introducing a new group of villains when you haven't even properly explained what happened to the last group you introduced. I recall the Librarian, or whatever her cryptic name was, telling Chief that humanity was the Forerunner's greatest threat. Now the Endless are their greatest enemy. You can't keep introducing things that the Forerunners beat and then locked away by claiming they're the greatest new threat every few games. Not every threat needs to be a ghost from the past. By my count, we have the Flood, the Didact, the Prometheans, and the Guardians that the Forerunners locked away just so they could piss all over the future. A future they plan to leave to humanity, so perhaps this is just a tier 3 civilization way of hazing the new guy. Now we have the Endless, who are never explained enough to even feel threatened by. The only thing the game shares is that they survived the Halo rings firing in the past, and because of that, the Forerunners consider them a threat and seal them up inside this ring. Since the Forerunners had already committed galactic genocide, I don't see much point in locking up a potential threat if the plan was to never set them free afterward.
I know of you, Reclaimer. But hear this. You are not the future.
The Harbinger is making pretty much the same statements that Didact made. The Harbinger aced the school of using teleportation to be a dick.
Here we are. As you can see, we are ready to progress as soon as... Please excuse me. I shall return.
That Adjutant Resolution had to take a phone call or something. Regardless, he comes back as the weapon is being told to shut down Halo's repair process and starts a boss fight.
No! No! No, 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 no! This isn't happening.
The Banished anti-aircraft guns can be very good if they can shoot a Pelican 3 times and not even destroy it.
Soon, the auditorium as well. The Harbinger and the Banished share the same goal. We fight together.
Sometimes I get the feeling that the developers never actually finished writing a Halo game. Why else do you get characters who keep mentioning big scary sounding concepts, like the Harbinger whose only concern is the Reformation, and nothing but vague explanations on what that is? None of it means anything to me or Master Chief for that matter. He's actually very straightforward. There are bad guys who want to do something he assumes is bad, therefore the C+ code in his brain tells him if bad, kill. It's like the villains didn't get the memo that this game was dropping the more grandiose ideas of Halo 5 in favor of making gamers like it again.
How many Spartans remain? Do you even know? There would have been 50 at Laconia Station, maybe more. Such loss. Do you feel it in your heart? Does it leave a hole?
You realize this is the second time all of Chief's comrades have been killed, right? Leaving him as the sole remaining Spartan. He handled it pretty well back then, and seems to be taking it pretty well now, all things considered.
Huh. No Escharum? I'm almost disappointed.
At the third AA gun, the weapon makes a remark about expecting another call from Escharum, only for none to come, meaning even the developers knew they were making Escharum annoying instead of intimidating, so it just made it seem like they were in on the joke.
You should leave me here with the rest of the garbage.
We all fail. We all make mistakes. It's what makes us human.
If you're asking for forgiveness for the past 2 Halo games, then that's something I can do, but only if you stop expecting me to read a bunch of tie-in novels to know what's going on.
I'm sorry, Chief, but how have you ever failed?
I should have protected Cortana. Stopped everything from going wrong. I failed her.
Cortana was going rampant and you had to deal with a Didac at the same time who was planning to wipe out humanity, which she sacrificed herself to stop. Then she somehow survived and decided to take over the galaxy on a whim. I don't see how you failed to protect her or how you could have known.
We need you.
Chief can fly a Pelican just fine. I don't see why Fernando is so necessary. He doesn't even fly Chief to his objectives, making him a pretty terrible pilot.
You are losing control.
Nothing is lost.
Deploy your army. Descend upon him.
No, odds will not break him.
That's the worst argument I think I've ever seen for why the leader of an army won't send his army after the single largest threat. Spartans are tough, but twice now they've been beaten by superior numbers, first on Reach and now here on Zeta Halo. I just finished destroying 3 separate anti-air guns so I could travel to a new location, where I have to find 4 separate beacons to reconstruct a signal so I can open a door.
It worked. You did it. Just like you always do. I'm not coming with you this time.
They replay this scene from the ending of Halo 4, except something's different. They don't use Cortana's model from that game, but her avatar from Combat Evolved. They really are just going to pretend that sexy Cortana doesn't exist. Even Halo 5 still acknowledged her briefly at the start of that game. Master Chief is wary of the weapon due to her being a copy of Cortana, and tries to delete her after she comes under attack by the Harbinger. It's understandable that he would be wary after what Cortana became, but her circumstances were far different. She went rampant at the end of her lifespan and then decided to go rogue. The weapon being attacked by another intelligence shouldn't lead him to thinking she's on the same path already.
You were going to delete me.
The weapon said earlier that her purpose was to be deleted after she succeeded in her mission of locking Cortana down, even telling Chief to trash bin her. Now she gets upset when the Chief attempts to do just that.
You were going to delete me.
And you stopped me.
If an AI can just turn off your ability to delete her, then that wasn't much of a safety protocol.
Infiltration program, remember?
You broke protocol.
And you broke protocol by disobeying orders twice over the last 2 games. You should have been court-martialed. Repeated, boss fight. Escharum Spartan Killer snuck into Fernando's Pelican and attacks him as he's about to pick up the Chief after he shut down Halo's repair process. He definitely stabbed the Pelican's controls several times, so I'm not sure how he manages to fly it away with Fernando afterward.
Track it.
Already doing it.
Open a gate. Find somewhere close.
It's not that simple.
Why?
Okay, it's kind of simple, but risky.
We save him, or die trying.
There's a pretty high chance that could happen. It's hard to lock down the coordinates.
I'd imagine it would be. They would still be in the Pelican since you just saw them fly off. You can't open a portal inside a moving Pelican, but somehow the weapon just knows where they're going to take Fernando.
Your plan has failed, as have you, Harbinger.
The auditorium is partially rebuilt.
And that is enough.
I do not know.
Find out.
In all of its years and across all of the games, Halo has never once created an interesting individual villain. The best villains in Halo were not defined by characters but by groups. The Covenant and the Flood were intriguing as a threat only as a group. The individuals of it were not. I honestly think this is why I still hold Halo Combat Evolved as the single best plot in the entire series. There were no Covenant leaders growling about how much they were going to crush humanity, no Flood monsters speaking in poems, and best of all, no brutes. The only thing it had was a sassy little AI created by a long-dead race who spent all of 2 minutes actually antagonizing you. Take the series back to that and stop trying to make it into some epic space drama. I have to ask an incredibly pedantic question, but I feel this needs to be asked. What benefit do laser handcuffs have over regular physical restraints? I see this all the time in badly written sci-fi, and it defies explanation each and every time. Isn't this just a more expensive way of doing what a few pieces of metal already do? Just because it's aliens in the future doesn't mean everything has to be sci-fi'd up. You can leave handcuffs in the category with mousetraps.
And you understand the consequences of defiance.
I do. Do you?
Atriox was the leader of the Banished, not the Brutes, but because he refused to surrender, Cortana used the Guardians to destroy the Brute homeworld, killing billions in the process, and making her about-face right before her death ridiculous. But why punish an entire species for the actions of one rogue group? They're called the Banished for a reason. If Guardians were powerful enough to destroy an entire planet, you would assume that would make Cortana unbeatable. Yet Atriox came for her and easily took her prisoner, presumably because the Guardians and Prometheans were written out of the plot. It doesn't seem like Cortana had any defenses on this ring at all.
How could she do that?
It's my fault.
How?
I should have stopped it. I could have reasoned with her.
You tried to reason with her, and she locked you up inside of a ball.
There's something you're not telling me.
The only way to access the ring, to reach Cortana,
was to make a copy.
The weapon finally realizes that she's a copy of Cortana, all due to her tendency to snap her fingers when turning things on or off. A character trait Cortana never had, but is depicted using in this game for a dumb reveal.
I thought perhaps that I had misjudged you. You would allow your cohort to die for the greater good. I pity you that I was correct.
This is where you and the Harbinger are trying to enact your plan. You didn't need to take Fernando hostage to get Chief to come here.
This world, looping, repeating, forever. Is it a symbol of life, or a cruel joke by the Forerunners?
Your existential crisis is making you think way too much into this.
Say goodbye.
Boss fights have mostly not been a thing in Halo outside of Halo 2 and 5, which were viewed by most to have been mistakes, so it's a strange choice to not only fill Halo Infinite with boss fights, but also make them play very similarly to that fight against Tartarus in Halo 2.
My death will inspire 1,000 others. Tell them I died well.
You died like a little bitch though. You went into the fight with an impenetrable shield and a human hostage tied to a torture bed and still lost.
You showed him respect. He was a monster.
Yes. But at the end, he was just a soldier. Hoping he'd done the right thing. Questioning his choices.
What version of Escharum did you fight? Because I fought and killed a brute who never questioned what he was doing, and hooked Fernando up to a torture device that tortured him more according to the amount of damage Chief inflicted on his shield.
We need to move. The Harbinger's at the auditorium. Whatever she's planning,
it's worse.
That's the thing. The game never tells you what the Harbinger is planning, and the player is left to assume what scenario they are trying to stop from happening. If it wasn't for the speech mannerisms of the Harbinger, and her ominous name, what she's doing would actually seem like the right thing to do.
The Master Chief will stop you.
He didn't stop me when I crushed his skull. Threw him into the void.
That would have helped had you done that before tossing him into space, but Chief clearly had an intact cranium at that time.
This ring is different. It has secrets within that I will have.
Would you like to detail the reason why this ring is different from the others instead of just alluding to it? You can't have a conversation about something if you both talk around the subject. After trying to take over the entire galaxy, Cortana realized that she'd forgotten the most important thing of all, the power of love and friendship. This was a character so completely ruined that 343 Industries had to wash their hands of the mistake and make a fresh copy of her.
Hear this, Forerunners. Your auditorium has fallen. The endless bound. your sins undone. Today we return.
Is there any argument for why the Endless shouldn't be allowed to come back? The Harbinger acts menacing and attacks Chief, but that's because she's badly written. The game never mentions any wrongdoing on their part. They simply survived Halo's firing, and that was enough for the remaining Forerunners to imprison their entire race.
This isn't an end. It's a chance to make amends, to rectify mistakes.
I swear this is the devs still talking about themselves. Make the weapons in multiplayer actually capable of killing someone, then we can talk forgiveness. There's no reason for the silent auditorium to collapse. But collapse it does.
Where are we?
Chief, I think the better question is when are we? I don't know how, but we've been gone for days. 3 days, to be precise.
How did you ascertain that? You jumped through a portal to the other side of the ring, and it appeared to be instant. Given how panicky Fernando is, he doesn't even act like he thought they were dead for the past 3 days.
This ring is different than the others.
The Banished and the Harbinger were looking for something that was never found. Why would the Forerunners hide something and throw away the key?
Just how many dangerous time capsules did the Forerunners leave behind?
What do we do now?
We finished the fight.
We all know this series has no endgame in sight, so stop ending games with that line.
What do I call you?
Any ideas?
Well, do you think it would be okay? You're sure?
You get to choose your name.
Then I think I might have the perfect one.
I would advise choosing a different name if it's Cortana. She murdered billions, and her copy taking the same name would concern people, to say the least. The after-credit scene shows that Atriox survived Cortana's attempt to kill him along with herself, and it makes zero sense why Atriox would allow everyone, including the Banished, to believe him dead while looking for the Endless's Silexes himself.